Hello, theme park enthusiasts, and welcome back to Planet Coaster. In this episode, I'm going to build a Wild Mouse coaster here toward the front of Appleford Amusement Park. So, I sort of wanted this coaster to be on the left-hand side as you enter the park and come under the train trestle. It'll sort of be standing out to that side. So, the thought I have with it is I sort of want its big structure to continue to funnel guests along the main walkway there and down towards the monster that's at the end. So while it is another ride in the park, and I'm sure guests will enjoy it as well, I visually wanted that sort of wall that the structure here is creating. So with that in mind, I will say myself, I've never actually been on a traditional Wild Mouse coaster. I'm interested in it, but I've just not had an opportunity. I've not been in a park that has had a Wild Mouse coaster, and so it's something that I still have to experience myself. I have, however, looked at a lot of different Wild Mouse coasters on YouTube, things of that nature, looked at the on-ride POVs, gained an understanding of how they're sort of laid out and such, and I knew for this park I did want something that was probably a bit bigger than a lot of traditional Wild Mouse coasters. So the one that I drew the most inspiration from for this particular coaster is Wild Mouse XXL, which is a traveling Wild Mouse coaster that sometimes goes to, I believe it's a winter festival in England, but it also is often throughout Europe. So height-wise and such, this coaster is said to be sort of in the same height range as Wild Mouse XXL, and the drops that it has toward the beginning and such are also based on that coaster. With that in mind, I did like the way this coaster sort of lays itself out. I found it much easier than a lot of coasters in setting up because of the fact that you don't have to worry about like the angle and the curve of the track like you do with others, because with the Wild Mouse it sort of is known for having those corners that you slam into in a way. So with that in mind, there's not a lot of angles. Really, the only angle I have is right there at the end where it connects back into the station and you sort of slide down into the station. But otherwise, it's sort of a straightforward and more rigid coaster, which I liked. I did find when I did the test run though that this part at the end here did not work as I had it. So the simple fix I put in for it was that I simply put in a block brake section there on top of a little hill, which will slow down the speed to whatever I want it to be. And then I decided, since I have that block brake section, let's go ahead and have a little bit of a run out at the end here, just to make it a little bit more enjoyable for the guests. I tried it again, and this time I got numbers that were satisfactory for what I want. And do not worry that you're seeing it in a sped up version right now. At the end of the episode, we will watch a ride on this coaster with it just at normal speed. So with this, as I said, I do have plans also for the other side of the park that I'm going to do something similar so that it'll also block in that side, and as I said, sort of visually direct the guests down towards the monster. So for here, I'm starting to set up the station building for the ride, and similar to what I did with the monster, I really liked how that turned out. I wanted to go ahead and make a building that was going to house things like restrooms and a first aid station, as well as a gift shop and such. So, in much the same fashion as the monster, I went ahead and built out this larger building, or the skeleton of the larger building, around the actual station house, so that way the actual line is somewhat contained inside, makes it a bit more realistic looking, I feel. And since I really feel like this is one of the 4 to 5 major coasters that this park's going to have. It's not nearly as big as the monster, but it is still a big coaster for the park. Since it is on the bigger side, I felt like it would have its own little gift shop. Now this gift shop would just have a few shirts dedicated to the particular ride, probably selling some mugs and things like that. It wouldn't be an enormous thing, but as I said, I sort of am balancing both the actual, like the reality of having a gift shop with a coaster like this, along with the fact that in-game I do need certain things, and I sort of want to hide them instead of making them overly obvious. So I really felt with a coaster like this that does have some extreme portions to it, it was a good idea to have a restroom and a first aid station near it, so that way if people needed to get sick and such, they had a place to go and they weren't making a mess on my floors. But at the same time, just having a random first aid station was going to look weird. So hiding it in this way, I felt really worked well for what I was wanting. And then, as you can see, the building doesn't exactly lay out perfectly. With that in mind, I actually have really come to like a particular construction piece that I'll show here soon that I feel like really works to assist in construction of the building and such. So for right now, what I'm doing is I'm taking out some of the structural supports there, because what I had in mind at the time was I was going to go ahead and build the building as I wanted it, and then I would put in my own supports that I would build onto the building. As you can probably tell with the wording I'm using in past tense and such, that is not what's going to end up happening. You'll see it here in the episode. But in the end, I found that just trying to use my created supports was really a pain. And so instead of doing that, I went ahead and I got the here I was just trying to put in windows from over there just to copy and paste them. Didn't work out, so I went ahead and constructed these on my own. But yes, trying to use my own custom supports, I realized just how hard custom supports are. I give an enormous amount of credit to people who do their own custom supports, but for me, the hassle wasn't worth it. And so you will see me in a while put some of those standard supports back, but I think I make them work in the building well enough, and we'll see that when we get there. But for right now, what I'm doing here is, as I said, using one of my favorite pieces for designing in this particular park, which is this beam. I like the fact that I can do two different colors with it, and that it's sort of got an old-fashioned look, and the thing I like the most about it is that it's not a gridded piece. So that way I can move it where I want it, I can rotate it, everything of that nature, and it's just a very flexible tool. So I am using it to somewhat hide corners that are not particularly lined up the way I want, but at the same time, I also, as you're going to see in this building, am using it as a design element as well. I'm sort of creating that square pattern at the top of each of them. And then here, I just wanted to add a little bit of an extra because the walls weren't lining up exactly to make it where the one piece worked. So instead, I've got that corner that's got a little bit added design to it. But because of the fact that the posts are the sort of design that they are, that little piece of addition works. It just actually looks like it's intentional, and it looks like it's attempting to make a piece of artwork there. So I really like how that came out, and as I said, I will use them throughout the building here. Originally, I had just intended to put them at the front of the building, but as time went on, I decided, they're working so well at the front, let's go ahead and do them all the way around the building. And as you'll see here soon enough, they're going to be inside the building as well. Well, right here they actually are, as they're covering the entrance from the interior of the building into the station area. Later on, I'll also use them to hold the lighting for this particular building. As I said, I'm not sure that this is a piece that I will use as heavily in parks in the future, but I have to say it is one of my favorite pieces in the game. I know people often have their favorite piece. A lot of people like sort of the very basic beams, but for me, I really like this particular piece much more. I like the fact that it's got a little bit of design to it, and I think it just adds something to the building by using that little extra element. So then I'm going to do a step here that I have not done in previous parks, but I'm doing in this park quite a bit, which is using glass. I don't think I've ever used glass in any of my parks previously, but it's just one of those here, like in this building, it feels like it's necessary. And then in the station, these are windows I've used in other parks, but I've just left them as empty holes. Here, I felt like, this is it's not a luxury park. It's not the highest end. It's not, a theme park per se and stuff, but it is a nicer park. And with that in mind, they would take the time and the effort to actually put in some glass into their different windows. And it's one of those, it's a little touch. You don't even notice it that much, but I just like the way it comes across looking, so I wanted to put that in there as an element. So again, just trying to sort of finalize this design. Definitely trying to make it look like it's intentional and not just an accident by any means. And now here what I'm wanting to do is go ahead and put in the different buildings that I'm going to have in the facility, and that way I can go ahead and get my pathing in from those different facilities over to the main path. That way people can exit from the ride and they can go and use all these different facilities. Then I'll go ahead and get them cladded in. I wanted, same as I did with the restaurant and with the gift shop, I wanted to get all of this done before I go ahead and close it in with the flooring and stuff, so that the actual real pathways will be hidden. And again, just continuing to use the theme that I have for the building by bringing these beams inside. I will say I use these beams much more in this building than I have anywhere else in the park up to this point. But I really, as I said, like the way they come across. And as the park continues, I can pretty much guarantee you will see these beams in other locations. Now there's a perfect example where I use them at two different heights there, but because of the way the beams are, I feel like I was able to jump down that height, and it really was acceptable. It works, and it doesn't seem like it's an accident. So then I'm going ahead, and I was going to bring stuff over from my monster gift shop, but I thought about it, and it's like I already brought over the postcards and stuff. What I wanted though is I want to get the floor down first, so that way I know the height that I'm going to be setting everything at. So that way I'm not putting everything in and then having to readjust it according to the floor height. Now this is one of those that I know Planet Coaster has been out for a long while, and I know I've played it a decent amount, but I'm still learning tips and tricks to the game. And one of the things I'm frustrated with this particular build is the height of the floor. And really, I felt like the floor height was sort of dictated by the different little pegs or the different little sides that come up on the pathways. I want to do better at that in the future because I don't like the fact that I had to raise this floor up as much as I did. It's not an enormous thing, but if you pay attention, you will be able to see when guests walk into the area and stuff that they will sort of be actually stepping through the floor. I don't like that clipping, but there wasn't too much I could do about it. I am proud of how I was able to get the angle of the ramps though to work, and then with the second ramp there, it's actually narrower than the tile that I was using. So what I did is I hid the excess in the wall, which, like I said, I'm fairly proud that that worked out the way it did, and I think it came out looking good. I go ahead and move the tile also up into the train area, or into the station area, but I do find that the tile really can't go on the side away from the guests. There's just not enough room over there. It would overlap with the track, and I don't want that. So I just go ahead and put it on the one side, and then I will go ahead and color in the other side so that it works a little bit better with what I've got going on. So here, again, this is one of those that I feel like I will learn and I will grow. At this point, I chose to put in the ceiling. I feel like afterwards, I would have been smarter to do all my detail work on the inside of the building first, then come back and put in the ceiling. I think it would have made my life a lot easier. But my rationale at the time was, as I said, I wanted to create these custom supports here, and so I was doing that. Now I think this support in the end I might actually have ended up leaving. I'm not exactly sure, but I will say the majority of them I try them here for a bit. I don't like the way they look in the end, and so I remove them. And I will say it gave me a real appreciation for just how hard it is to actually make these supports the way that people do. So here I am trying the different structures and stuff. And the thing about it to me is when I really decided to delete them, I felt like you could easily tell which ones I had created versus which ones were part of the structure already. And I didn't want that. I didn't want it to look where it really stood out and such. And the fact of the matter was, it was taking an enormous amount of time, and like I said, the benefit of it just wasn't there for me. So then here, I brought the stuff over from the monster. As I said, it is the same stuff, but really, there's not an enormous amount of selection in the game. I use some of the older shelves here and stuff. I have found better ones that I liked on the workshop since then. And so in some of my newer things, I do use some different shops. Then here I'm adding in some sort of fake benches and such, so that way people can, it looks like sit, even though they truly can't in game. So my rationale for this is the fact that I like the way this looked over at the monster. It's obviously going to be oriented in a different fashion over here, but the thought process for me is, as I said, this is one of the major coasters for the park. There's going to be the monster, there's going to be the coaster that's going to be on the opposite side of the entrance from this wild mouse, and then there's going to be a coaster or two that are smaller, but also still somewhat significant coasters in the park. And with those in mind, I wanted to have these sort of areas for everyone to be able to be there. So I wanted to have stroller parking and wheelchair access and all these things, because these are technically family coasters, but they are at the same time ones that would attract adults as well. So here I am just going ahead and creating the sign for the ride. Much the way I have with like the haunted house and such, I'm not going to give this like a specialized name and stuff, because really this coaster is what it is. It is a wild mouse. So going with a very basic name, I will end up putting the name both on the side of the building here as well as on the structure itself, because I just do like the way that the name of the coaster on the structure sort of shines in the dark and such, and I wanted to make sure I had that. So then I started thinking about lighting, and again, I went with these beams. I really liked the way they looked, and at first I was thinking about going very old-fashioned here, and I really do want to use this piece at a point in one of my parks. I like the look of this candle, uh, sort of candle, oh, now the word's escaping my mind, I don't know why. But I do like the way that this chandelier, there we go, this candle chandelier looks. The problem I have with it is that, as you sort of saw there for a moment, in order to get it at the height I would want it, it has to stick through the ceiling. And then if it doesn't stick through the ceiling, it's going to be too low where it's pretty much almost at the level where it would bang the customer's heads. And I just didn't like that for this building. I will find at a point in the future a way to use that in a building, because I really like the design. It's just, with that rope attached to it, it makes it so much more difficult. I wish they had just given you the actual chandelier itself, and then you could attach a piece of rope or chain or such that was a length that you felt worked. So instead, for this particular building, it was interesting. I was going with the chandelier, which was going to be a very old-fashioned look to the building, and instead I sort of went with the reverse and went with what I consider a fairly modern-looking light structure there. And then I do check to see how the lighting is from these, because I think it's a really important part in the game. If you're fairly new to Planet Coaster, it is something you want to keep in mind. I mean, I felt like I had put an enormous amount of lights in here by bringing these in. But then when you actually turn it to night mode and these lights are the ones that are supposed to be providing you the light in your place, you may find that they really just don't produce that much light. These were especially true with that. I mean, that just is not well lit. So what I did is I actually took one of the small lights, the floodlights, that gives off a large amount of light, pretty much the light that I felt like these lights should be giving off, and I just took one of those and inserted it in the middle of each of the lights, hiding it inside of it. So that way the light gave off the appropriate amount of light, in my opinion. Somebody who's more of a lighting expert might say, no, you're wrong, they would not have given off that amount of light. But for me, that was what I was expecting to be getting, is sort of the look I end up with here. It's just that the original lights, I felt like, were sort of underpowered. So I get all those into place, and I realize this corner over here is sort of dark the way it is. Needed to change that, and so I go ahead and put in one more set of lights there in the corner. Same thing over here. Was looking at it, trying to figure out how to get that light to work without sort of being obnoxious. Then hiding my lights inside that I need. And all I do is I just get them all lined up, and then at the last moment I just have them go up into the other lights so that they disappear. So now the basic box of the building is set up. I have these signs for a wild mouse, and I debate using them. The ones here I sort of liked. The sort of corner one didn't really work for me, but this one I was able to change and it worked. And then, as I said, now I have the basic box set up, so now it's all about theming the building so that it looks the way I want it. And for me, the design stuff is a lot of trial and error. I really don't go into it with that much of a plan, I will admit. It's one of those that's sort of like, I'll look at something, I'll see, hey, I sort of like the way that looks. I don't want to repeat the exact design I had on another building. And what I ended up with is I knew I wanted to do quite a bit of uplighting around this coaster, as I like to do with my coasters. So that way at night, it gives that sort of glow to the skeleton of the building. Here I am putting in the fairy lights because pretty much every single building in this park is gonna have fairy lights to it. It's just a thing for this particular park, and so it's gonna continue throughout. But going back to the other lighting, as I said, I like that. For if I was to own an amusement park, I would want to do exactly as I'm doing with this park, where I would have uplighting on the different structures. So that way, while you're on ride, you would have those lights at different points that would come up and shine up at you. I think that's a really cool thing. And then at the same time, it also just gives an off-ride view that is really cool, because it gives you sort of this extra, I guess almost, I wanted to say mystery, but it's not really mystery, but it just gives it an almost extra sense to the ride itself. It makes it feel more special than it really is. It doesn't have to have theming and stuff to it. It's simply just the lighting itself, and the way it casts its own shadows really adds to what the thing is. So with that in mind, I had found these, what I for some reason feel like are towers off of a building in New York. I don't know if they actually are or not, but that's what that sort of design at the top of those little towers strikes me as, is they're like out of a tower from New York. And with that, it's like, since I'm doing the uplighting throughout the thing, why not put an uplight into each one of those little towers? I think that would be a really cool thing, and it just adds, once again, just that little difference to this building overall. And it's all about, I want everything in the park to sort of fit together. They're built at different time periods, so I do want to show that it has aged separately and everything of that nature, but that it all still works together in a way. So things like the fairy lights help connect things, And then at the same time, the towers are similar to towers I have on other buildings, but they are different. And that way, with the lights, it makes it where it's not just like, oh, it's an afterthought of a little design that's thrown onto the building. It's something that's there as an actual feature for the building. I also did care about the orderly way I put those beams onto the top, because I did want to make sure that when you were on ride and stuff, when you were going up that lift hill and you're going past that, you were able to see that it's sort of uniform in its look at the top of the building. That's something that matters to me, because I know when I'm on rides with a lot of coasters and stuff and I'm going up that lift hill, I really care about the things that I'm looking at, what I'm seeing around me, everything of that nature. So it was one of those things that I wanted to ensure that I did have that going on for this ride as well, where it's when you're looking at the roofs of buildings, they're not ugly, that they actually do look like they were actually planned and people thought about the fact that they would be seen by people on ride. So I like the way that that ended up looking. Here I'm adding a little extra detail work. One thing I have thought about at this point is I'm really not a fan of the wall on this entrance area inside because of that framework, that wall there. And then I just am struck by it. Why not move the sign also inside? Give it that little look, like the framework there is actually suspending the sign, much like I did the shirts are on the framework on the gift shop side of it. I thought it worked out well that way. And so here, just putting some signs for these different locations. So as I've done with multiple other buildings, just wanted to add that little design feature there. Just trying to hide some of the standard stuff as far as the bathroom goes to make it look a bit better. Now here basically what I'm wanting is just to basically try to move this over slightly, but I keep struggling with it because of the floor and stuff. So I end up having to just go in and actually pick the pieces themselves, and I realized that I got those side pieces as well, so I had to adjust that. Again, testing it out, seeing how it looks from the roof and stuff. There is that one piece on the roof that I wish I could adjust, but it just will not. It needs to be there in order to have the lighting where I need inside for the t-shirt area and such. So again here, I thought about the fact that from the front of the park, you can see the monster sign, so why not have it that we put the Wild Mouse sign also where it's visible? Here I was just wanting to see if people were using my benches inside the restaurant and stuff, and sadly I found that they were not. It's one of those, it seems like sometimes the benches will get used, but they won't, it doesn't seem like they are used as much as I would hope that they would be. Not exactly sure why that is. So here I go in and I add just a little bit of extra theming that I had thought about before and I just needed to add in. So like there I was adding in a card reader and such, just to make sure that it had that little bit of extra authenticity to it. Then I had realized also I was still charging for the haunted house and such, and didn't want to be doing that. Once again, this park is not going to be charging in that way. It's going to be just you pay your price to get into the park, and then everything else is free. So I'm just basically doing some of those housekeeping chores that need to be done in the park overall. And I'm doing it also because of the fact that I wanted to kill some time to get people onto the ride and such. So I wanted to make sure that we had the people ready to ride it. I had these people on here, and now we're at the point where I have slowed it down to standard time, so we'll actually get to experience the ride with these first people to ride on the new Wild Mouse coaster. With that in mind, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode, and if you have, I would really appreciate it if you go ahead and click that like button. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel as well, as it really does help me out, and it'll allow me to know that you care about having more of these videos in the future. With that in mind, I do hope you will return for more episodes of Appleford Amusement Park. I'm really enjoying building this park, and I'm hoping that you're enjoying watching its creation as well. So, I hope to see you again for Appleford Amusement Park, and for more episodes of Planet Coaster.